Hello, this is Edith Newmeyer, and I'm the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. I want to talk a little bit about Peru today. I went on the Inca Trail, ending up at Machu Picchu. And if you've seen my last video, then you will know a little bit about the Inca Trail. But today I want to talk about Peru. And the reason why I went to Peru is because I have always been very fascinated about the history of Peru and especially the buildings there. And I heard so much about it and I watched so many videos. There's one guy that I want to mention right now, and his name is Brian Forster. And he has a a YouTube channel and talks quite a lot about Peru and the buildings and the pre-Inca structures there. And I wanted to see it for myself. Now, I talked to my guide, and my guide, of course, believed everything came from the Incas, okay? And I talked to him, I said, how about other people, cultures building these buildings? And he says, well, who do you think it was? Aliens? And I said, well, why not? Aliens make sense. But again, after going to Peru, I actually figured out maybe who built these buildings. And of course, they're just speculations, but somebody has to start thinking about it and trying to figure out where these buildings are from. And my guide said, well, why would people hide things from us? Why would they not tell us? I said, maybe it would giants. How about if giants build it? There's many sightings of giants. And he says, well, why would they hide that from us? Well, there again, why would they hide it from us? Why would they not want us to know that there's giants? There were giants all over the world, all over the Americas were giants, and they were hiding all the skeletons that they found. And there were plenty. If you do some research, even about Peruvian giants, you will see that there's quite a lot of scientific findings about giant skeletons. There were giants, of course, all over the world. You know, when the Israelites came into the promised land, there were giants in the land. And we know from Genesis 6:4, we can read, the Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. Okay, so there were already giants before the flood. We know that. And we know that God destroyed not just humankind, but the Nephilims as well, because of their wickedness. And so going to Peru, seeing these big megalithic rocks made all sense that maybe giants actually made these structures, that pre-flood structures. And I think there's research already done that these structures are pre-flood structures because they are so old. You can tell that there were catastrophic events, tumbling them over, cracking them. And so, yeah, it makes very sense that these buildings that were there were destroyed during the flood, and some remained, and then the Inca came and built on top of it, which makes sense to me. Again, why would the government of Peru hide that? Why would the governments of the world, hide the giants? Well, they don't want us to know about true history. That is the whole thing about it. But I found something very interesting. I found this little book in Peru, and it's Incan Legends. This is the legend of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. Okay? And interesting enough, if you look at the picture behind it, there are some megalithic, this is a megalithic structure. Okay? It's interesting, this is what the legend says. At the beginning of time, there was only darkness. The sun and the moon and the stars did not exist. Only the Creator God lived. Kontiki Viracocha, who had risen from the waters of Titicaca. Okay, that time Titicaca probably didn't exist, but since the Indians, that's all their reference points, so they believe that this creator rose from Titicaca, okay, which is probably a different Titicaca. But Kontiki Viracocha, feeling lonely, created a race of giants who looked very much like he did. These giants were strong and they liked to live in the dark. Now, again, in the dark could be a reference to darkness in terms of not living in the light, like being away from God. And the next the next one tells us, but these giants never obeyed the Creator and they fought among themselves all the time until they were destroyed. Okay, now, how did God destroy them? Through the flood. They killed each other, but God gave them a rest in a sense. So, is that compatible to what I just read in Genesis? Yes. Is that compatible to the book of Enoch, where he describes the giants? Yes. Is that compatible to the book of Jubilee and Jasher, the book of Jasher, where they talk about giants? Yes, it is. So here again, we hear about giants. Now, the difference here is that this says that God created these giants, okay? But we know from the biblical books that God didn't create them really. It was the fallen angels who intermarried, at least that's what we think, with the humans created the giants. So it was the really the fallen angels created the giants. And because they didn't listen to God, and these giants didn't listen to God. I mean, these fallen angels didn't listen to God either, so their offspring didn't listen to God as well. So they were very destructive. They killed human beings. Okay, they killed each other. They ate human beings. They were really, really evil. And so here we see them. Okay, and here is the human being. Okay, that God also created. However, a pair of humans had also been created and they were obedient. And that pair of human that was, of course, obedient was Noah and his wife. And God saved them. Here's the flood. Okay, God brought the flood on one of those dark days, disappointed by so many sins committed by the stone giants. Kontiki Viracocha decided to eliminate them. His fury made it rain continuously and water covered the whole earth. Okay, so very similar to the creation stories and creation story in the Bible. However, Kontiki Viracocha wanted to save the human couple from the flood. To do this, he secured them in a cave in the highest mountains in the Andes, where the water could not reach. Now, a little bit different, right? A little bit different. Of course, we know about Noah building the ark, and that's how God brought them through. So, the giants were there pre-flood. Now, what I believe also, because this catastrophic event of the flood also may have caused the the plates to split. Now we know we have the African and European plate, and then we have the uh, Atlantic, and then of course we have the Americas. And we know that these two plates were together. The Americas and the African plate used to be together. So is it possible that they split during this catastrophic event of the flood? Very possible. Okay, and because of that, um, you know, that split happened, and so before the flood, these giants were very close to the mainland and still stuck to Africa, and so they populated the whole continent and this whole plate that was used to be together. So do you understand what I'm talking about, right? Um, so maybe then during this catastrophic event, it split, okay? And so then when we had people over at the Andes also left over. I don't know, speculations, but it is very obvious that most likely giants did it. I don't know if I just said that when the Spanish came and asked the Incas who built these megalithic rocks, they said it was the giants. So it's very, very likely that these uh, megalithic structures on which the Incas built were indeed constructed by giants, which makes sense. Maybe a culture that was much more advanced than any other culture we know today. We know that the pyramids are also pre-flood structures, just the way it is. Okay, people say, "Oh, they did this and this and that." No, they were pre-flood structures. Very obvious. Okay, there's many places in this world where we know that there's pre-flood structures. For instance, I think in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, those were also pre-flood structures. Um, and those are the only ones I know right now, but I know there's a lot more if you want to do some research. And to say that these were done by, number one, a very high culture, a culture that had a technology that was that's really lost to us today. And it's just when you look at, especially Peru, it's very obvious that the structures that the Peruvian did and the structures that were pre-Peruvian or pre-Inca. Okay, the Inca structures very different from those megalithic, what I now call pre-flood structures. It's just obvious. I saw some more videos by this Brian Forrester where they actually cut into the rock. And you can't rock, I mean, you cannot, you have to use a harder material to cut a rock. And this Brian said very clearly that the Incas could have never ever done the cutting, the precise cutting that was done in many of these megalithic uh, rocks in Peru. Okay, so yeah, do some research. I thought it was really interesting, and I thought this was interesting. Okay, when I came across this legend, and of course it's just a legend, but every legend has something, um, some truth to it. Okay, uh, if these Incas talk about giants that used to be in the land, there's also in Peru, they also found a lot of skeletons not only elongated skulls, and I talked to my guide about elongated skulls, and he said, "Oh yeah, they were bound." And I said, "No, I am talking about elongated skulls where the plates, the plates from the skull was very, very different." And do some research on that too. Elongated skulls of Peru. I didn't have the time to actually go there this time, but again, there's a guy called L.A. Marsuli that has done a lot of research on that. Look up our L.A. Marsuli, and he's a Christian. Look up L.A. Marsuli and the Giants. There's other people that did. Tom Horn did some research on Giants of North America. Okay, so because there are so many legends uh, amongst the Indians, the Hopi Indians, about giants. I think they call it either long walkers or skywalkers or something like that. And there's many legends about giants, with the Hopis. So these giants not only existed in Peru, but all along, the Americas. And they were still, I think, giants probably until the Inca time. I mean, the Inca time and the Indian time. Here, the Anasazi, North America. Of course, we had the Anasazi, and you can find things, along with the Anasazis who lived until 1200 here in North America, and then they all of a sudden disappeared. And I'm talking about the cliff dwellings, the buildings, the cliff dwellings, and the Indians that built the cliff dwellings. All of a sudden, they were gone, and nobody knows why. And some people say because of cannibalism. There was some kind of culture that overran the Anasazi, and they were so scared that they kind of left, but nobody knows where they went. So, anyways, there's lots of things that you can research and investigate about the giants. That is not, the Bible has one verse in Genesis about the giants being here before the flood. And then, of course, we know that after the flood, they were still around in the promised land, like David and Goliath, for instance. And, when again the Israelites came into the promised land, they said that we were like grasshoppers, compared to these giants. So we know they were still around. I don't know what happened. They didn't get killed, all of them, or because the angels intermarried, did one of Noah's descendants still have a genetic part, carried still a genetic part of these giants, and then they kind of came mutated? I don't know. I have no idea. Did some of them survive? Of course, there's not enough research. Why is there enough research? Because people are trying to hide it. Who is trying to hide it? Well, of course, Satan is trying to hide it. We know that. I mean, we can go that far back that we know Satan is trying to hide and trying to hide history. So we will say, oh, what the heck, all that biblical stuff is not true. But when we see it in different cultures, we see these legends. So we're having truth. We can't just put it up as myth. We cannot just put it up as fairy tales or made up things. There are truth to it. When they say there were giants, there were giants. I really believe that. So if you're interested in this, do some research. I just think there is so many things hidden in the Bible that we need to research, because we only have a small amount of information in the Bible. Such a small amount. I like to read Enoch, the book of Enoch. I'm not saying it is, I shouldn't say it's not inspired by God, because how am I supposed to know if it's not inspired? There's lots of things in Enoch that I can say Enoch was inspired. He was a godly man, and he was inspired by God. So some say, well, it's not scripture. Um, I don't know. I mean, if I would not have historical books, how am I supposed to know about the Egyptians or about Alexander the Great or the Greeks or whatever? I have to also go by historical writings, and legends are partly historic, and we need to see that, and we need to piece things together, okay, and say, okay, this is correct here, this is here. And so if two cultures say the same thing, you can say, oh, wait a minute, it could be probably the same. Like, for instance, the flood. We have flood stories in many different cultures. So why would we then say, oh, this is inspired and this one is totally a lie? We cannot do that, because if I have an inspired book here and it correlates with this over here and it says the same thing, then this has to be correct. So that's the way I piece things together. I don't just throw things out. I piece things together. That's why we are here. That's why we're humans. That's why we have a brain. And we need to piece things together. And when I went to Peru, I could piece things together again, especially finding this book about the giants. Okay? There are giants, and other people discovered that too, like L.A. Marzulli, who is a Christian and who believes the same thing, and Tom Horn. And they all kind of piece things together and say, people, this is the way it is, okay? Don't just blindly go through this world, but open your brain a little bit and see what's around you, okay? So nobody can mislead you, because when you go through the world like this, okay, you only see this much, people will be able to mislead you, and you know they will. I will be talking about something else later on. People, there are so many people that say, oh, we're Christians and we believe this, and we are believers in Yeshua, and they use all these words, and yet they are so wrong. They are so wrong, okay? Oh, we're inspired, but yet they are so wrong. So open up your eyes. You cannot just look at the Bible, because the Bible is very, very limited. You need to open your eyes and see all the things around you that show you that what's going on, and that show you the works of Satan. I will finish up today, and I hope you enjoyed this. Continue you do your research if you're interested in these things. I find them very fascinating. I find them very fascinating that we're discovering things, pre-flood things. Okay, pre-flood things. All right. Let the Holy Spirit guide you always.